All right. Well, welcome everybody. We're really glad to have you all join us for this special MnCAN event. We're really grateful to provide education about mental health and aphasia in our MnCAN community. And we are proud to partner with Sarah Nawan, who is a licensed social worker who helps us in our care partner support groups for both aphasia, post-stroke, and PPA as well. Um, so we're just really happy that you're all here for this. And if you want to go, Sarah, to the next one.
All right.
So I'm gonna, oop, can you
Oh,
go back?
did I go a little further? Sorry. Okay, there we
Oh,
go.
no, you're good. You're good.
Oh,
Nope,
oh,
next.
back. Okay.
Sorry.
We're working out the
There we go.
kinks, guys.
There we go.
Okay, good.
So, so most of you
Oh, big
here
room.
were diagnosed with aphasia or you care about someone with aphasia. And so we know that mental health issues with or without aphasia are difficult, and then you add aphasia into the mix, and it just adds another layer. Um, so a major medical event that caused your aphasia impacts your life significantly. So we want to explore and talk about the emotions that come with having a life-changing medical event resulting in aphasia and how that communication difficulty really can affect mental health as well.
Right. All right. Am
And do you
I?
want me to go back to the introduction one about you? I can introduce you
Sure. Go back. Okay, there we go.
there. So Sarah is going to present to us, and we're really grateful, Sarah, for you and collaborating with you. But Sarah has had many, many years of experience and 15 years working at Courage Kenny with individuals who had stroke, traumatic brain injury, or spinal cord injury, along with their families. So she has a lot of experience working with neurological disorders and people with aphasia. And for the last 11 years, she's been in private practice in Chanhassen, working with individuals, couples, and families. Um, and as I mentioned, Sarah co-facilitates our care partner support group the second Thursday of the month on Zoom and our primary progressive aphasia care partner support group the second Monday of the month on Zoom. So we're really, really grateful for Sarah's expertise. Angie and I are here to support some of the more communication slash aphasia questions or information, and Sarah really is the expert on mental health. So take it away, Sarah.
All right. I think I should do a little dance across the screen. Here we go. But I won't. I won't. So it's good to be here with all of you. The talk today is really going to be about just mental health support, some of the more predominant diagnosis that you may have experienced or have heard about. And then just to kind of go through education and maybe empowerment a little bit of what would be helpful, what might be supportive, and that kind of thing. So the first one initially is going to acknowledge emotional support. And I think sometimes when we hear emotional support, it feels like somebody may be saying, "How are you?" And you saying good or bad or otherwise, right? Emotional support from our perspective today is going to really look at how you can get your needs met, and maybe the diagnosis that comes up, maybe depression, anxiety, that kind of a thing. And it's going to look different for everybody. So one of the things that we're going to kind of go through each tier, mental and emotional support, again, is going to be really important for families and for individuals with aphasia. The support is going to look different for everybody. Support might be a meeting, which maybe some of you already are attending. It might look like mental health support, seeing a therapist, a group therapy. It might look like a conversation group. It might look like a care partner support group. And it may just look like spending time with family and friends, spending time with your animals, being able to be in the community, that kind of a thing. But really doing what works best for you and acknowledging that empathy and compassion and feeling safe in those spaces are going to be most important. So some of the common diagnoses that I see a lot when I was working at Courage and also when I work in my private practice are around depression, anxiety, grief, and then intimacy or relationship changes that can come into play. The one question I will often ask clients or really talk to with families is, how is it impacting the individual and how is it impacting relationships? Because it's going to look different across both. How an individual is feeling, maybe being diagnosed with a depression or anxiety or grief, and then also the relationships that they're in, how they're feeling supported, or also what that person's experiencing within the diagnosis is also going to be really important. All right, so we're going to start with depression here. A lot of us know depression. We have maybe experienced depression at some point in our life. The things I really do want to capitalize on or really be consistent about across all of them is that some of these cross over each other. So some of the maybe symptoms of depression could look like symptoms of anxiety. Some symptoms of grief can look like symptoms of depression. So to me, it's really important to understand. I always tell people the pattern of your diagnosis, like what are you experiencing in it? Not necessarily just acknowledging I'm depressed. Like that's important, but what are you experiencing within that space? And so depression is a mood disorder and it causes persistent feelings of sadness and loss of interest. That's kind of basic. It can occur in one episode. You could say I felt depressed, during the winter time. And then when the sun started shining or the days started getting longer, I felt better. I was able to get out. I was able to connect with people. I was able to find my resources. That felt good. Or it can be ongoing. Some people experience what we like to call functional depression, where they're going through their day, meeting with people, going to appointments, getting up, walking through all the stuff they normally do, but they're just feeling low and feeling sad and don't really know what's going on. Mm-hmm. So that's something to really pay attention to is like, how long is the depression lasting? What is it feeling like? And do some days feel better than the others? So what depression symptoms might look like, and again, you're going to see probably some of these symptoms in anxiety and in grief as well. So just know they can all kind of crosswalk one another. But some of the symptoms that are pretty typical are being tired or feeling lack of energy, sleep changes, physical body symptoms like body aches, feeling like you have migraines or headaches, changes in appetite, either overeating or undereating, forgetting to eat, not liking your favorite foods or not enjoying when you're eating, like it doesn't taste good, or maybe you don't really get that enjoyment out of it, trouble concentrating. That could be in a conversation with somebody. It could be doing one of your favorite things. Like if you like to do puzzles, it's too much to try to focus on that, or going to somebody's home and spending time with them. It's too much energy to focus on that. Trouble remembering or making decisions, feeling agitated, and then feeling a real level of guilt or self-blame. I see this one a lot is just like, I don't know why I feel this way. I see it's affecting people I love. I can't get myself out of it. And so really being compassionate with yourself that those emotions are real and they're not your fault, but they are something to be supported. All right, so this little cycle, I call it the vicious cycle of depression. And this could look like one day you don't experience any of it, and the next day you experience it maybe for 3 days straight. Go back here. So thinking of it this way is maybe starting to feel a little down, right? Maybe you go out to visit family and you're thinking, the last time I did this, it felt really good. I felt connected. I felt joy. This day didn't feel great. So I start to feel depressed. I begin to start feeling that low energy, low motivation, and fatigue. And then I notice like I'm not getting out of bed. I'm not getting out of the house. I'm not doing things I enjoy. Decreased activity starting to happen. I start feeling withdrawn, not only from maybe my responsibilities, but from people. And when I start feeling like that, I start avoiding things. When I start avoiding and withdrawing, I become guilty. I start feeling hopeless, maybe withdrawing even more, or getting into arguments or difficult interactions with people. And then it goes back to, because that's all happening, I feel depressed. So you can kind of see those things kind of all lead into the next one. And if you're not having any outlet or somebody to talk to or be able to work through that with you, it kind of just spins and spins and spins internally. So that's why that piece for support is really important. You've probably all seen either they call them emotion wheels. They're really colorful, big circles, and they kind of have a lot of words on them. Sometimes I think they are a little overwhelming, but this is similar to that. If you think about anger, sadness, feeling anxious, hurt, or embarrassed are pretty typical emotions that we probably all feel all of the time. But what's happening below that feeling is significant, right? So I might be angry, but I'm also feeling impatient. I'm feeling maybe irritated or offended by something somebody said. If I'm feeling sad because I'm maybe not doing things I did all the time, I'm disappointed. I'm feeling a little bit paralyzed in my day to day. I'm feeling sad or tearful. I might get a little pessimistic and negative. So kind of understanding that those top emotions, there's a lot of things kind of swimming underneath that. And this is kind of an elementary thing, but I like this tip of the iceberg. You've probably all seen this before or heard it before of like, well, that's just the tip of the iceberg, right? That's maybe something that happened, but you don't really know what's going on. And I see this a lot when I meet with clients or individuals where it's, I'm feeling maybe a little bit lonely. Like, okay, that's the tip of the iceberg feeling, but what's happening underneath the surface? Well, people aren't coming to visit me. People said they would be helpful and they're not. Wasn't able to have a phone call. And those are all things happening under the surface that sometimes is hard to share with people because it's vulnerable. But that's what gets us into that loop a little bit, is not being able to really give or acknowledge your full self because you're worried about what other people are going to think about.
So we just wanted to take just a second and just highlight some research and some resources from the American Stroke Association. And doing our research and sharing them here with you. The American Stroke Association does say that post-stroke depression is common, affecting approximately 1/3 of stroke survivors. So the things Sarah's talking about, we want to just kind of normalize and for you all to see that it's common in about 33% of the people that have had a stroke. And if you're looking for additional resources to like click on or share with family or friends, the American Stroke Association has some really lovely handouts. The links are here, and you will get a copy of these slides after the presentation. So you could certainly, do a search and find the same information and print it out and share it with people so other people in your life can understand what you're experiencing too. Thanks, Sarah.
Yes. All right. The next one is anxiety. I will say that I hear a lot of people, this word seems to be kind of like, I'm really anxious. I feel a lot of anxiety. It covers probably everybody experiences it at some point or sometime in their life. So the way that you can look at anxiety is, again, those kind of crosswalking a little bit with the depression piece, is experiencing occasional anxiety as a part of life, right? All of us feel worry. I felt anxiety this morning thinking, okay, how am I going to present? How's it going to go? Are people, right? How are they going to take it? What are they going to feel about it? That's normal. That's a part of life. What it can look like and feel different is how long it continues or how long it's ongoing. The intensity or the excessiveness of the worry, feeling nervous and tense, having that increased heart rate or that fast breathing, starting to feel real sweaty or almost like fatigued, like my muscles don't feel like they're working, feeling like I'm kind of out of my body when I'm experiencing something that is occurring for me, trouble concentrating. And a big one is interruptions of sleep. It's either difficulty falling asleep, waking up at that 3 a.m. point and not being able to go back to sleep because you're having that ruminating thinking, and then going back to sleep and then sleeping more into the day than you would like to, just because of that lack of being able to calm yourself down in your nervous system. So the what is anxiety is, again, that difficulty controlling worry. The way I like to describe anxiety a lot is we as humans like to be able to have some control. And it's nice to have control if something is stressful or something feels like it's out of our control. And anxiety almost makes that really difficult. It sends a sense of hypervigilance where I'm looking for a threat. Um, you've probably heard this before of like, if I'm, walking through the woods and I'm having a wonderful time just enjoying everything. And what if a bear pops out at me? It's like, well, a bear is probably not going to pop out at you in the middle of like the woods, maybe, right? But most often not if you're walking along a pathway. But anxiety can feel like that level, like you're waiting for something to pop out. And then how am I going to respond to it? Many people will have gastrointestinal issues with anxiety. So stomach issues, maybe difficulty with like the bathroom, having to run to the bathroom a lot. Difficulty with eating certain foods just because it doesn't settle well. And knowing that there's many different types of anxiety. So there's a spectrum where there could be panic disorders where you're feeling like so overwhelmed. Some people have described it like a heart attack, like my heart's pounding, I can't breathe, I can't calm myself down. To general anxiety, which is like things feel really overwhelming day to day that I'm doing. Anxiety due to a medical condition. We see that a lot when there's a new diagnosis. What's going to happen? What am I going to experience? What's going to change? And then social anxiety. If I'm going into this situation, I'm not able to communicate my needs, or somebody isn't asking me questions to be able to communicate my needs, what's that going to mean for social interaction? But knowing it's on a spectrum, and you might experience one, or you might experience three, but it could go kind of across the board. The one thing that I will talk a lot about panic disorder is it feels debilitating to people and kind of scary. And a panic attack, and this is maybe just food for thought, a panic attack lasts maybe 4 minutes if you're able to acknowledge it's happening and to just kind of let it go. A lot of people try to control it and stop it. And so those panic disorders can almost feel like they overtake a day or days because you're trying to stop the feeling from happening. So that's something to be aware of. If you start feeling that level of panic, acknowledge it's happening and maybe find ways to kind of get in a space of calm and safety and know it will pass, even if it feels really scary. Again, this is that cycle that we talked about with depression. So thinking about a situation, we'll take me speaking today, for example. I could have said, okay, I feel anxious about doing this. I don't know who's going to be on the camera. I don't have an idea of like what people are wanting or expecting. I know my material, but I feel anxious. If I then continue to have that level of anxiety without calming myself down, I might start increasing my scan for danger. Okay. What if people thinking about me? What if the computer turns off? What if I start getting super overwhelmed? When I start feeling like that, maybe people will go, I'm just not going to show up. I'm not going to do that. Or I'm going to say I can only be there for this slide and not that slide. We start trying to avoid or escape the situation. That offers us only short-term relief. It doesn't support functioning. It doesn't support coping skills. And if that short-term relief happens, what tends to happen then is that long-term increase of anxiety, loss of confidence, difficulty in coping, or increase of not feeling safe, that gets even greater. And then we get back into that anxiety loop. So again, without coping skills or support, it just can keep wrapping itself around without any relief. And this one I won't talk so much about. When you guys get these slides, this might be something just kind of helpful to be aware of, but these are just those things that can come out of play. A lot of the time, I'll have clients say like, my brain just feels foggy when I feel anxious. And I like to refer to it as a sticky brain. That feeling of like overthinking, my memory goes, I have trouble concentrating, sleeping, lack of patience, that heartbeat, everything just feels like it's sticky and I can't get an ability to kind of get out of it. And so knowing that that's really normal with anxiety, and it's one of those things to kind of recognize when you're starting to feel that way. All right. The vagus nerve. Some of you might have heard about this. I think it's kind of been a bigger conversation around, especially if you're talking about with doctors around like brainstem and that kind of thing. I think it's a really helpful thing to bring up. What is the vagus nerve? The vagus nerve is essentially the nerve that runs from your brainstem and it wanders through your face, down your neck, into your chest, and into your gut. And so that kind of makes sense when we talk about that piece of, I felt twitching in my face or my stomach started to hurt or I had difficulty with eating or kind of gastro feelings when I was feeling anxious. It controls the throat sensations. So I'll hear clients a lot talk about like my throat feels like it's closing. I'm having trouble breathing. It kind of messes with the calming signals. So that fight or flight response. And when the autonomic nervous system is dysregulated, which is that fight or flight piece for all of us, the vagus nerve can misfire. And when this happens, it affects your brain. And it can happen with medications. It can happen with situations that come into play. But it sends us into that fight or flight response of like, I have to run away from something and avoid it, or I have to lean in and really almost over compensate or overthink about it. What does it cause? It can cause tightness in your throat. It can cause chest pressure. It can cause breathing, feelings where you almost feel like you can't breathe or it's hard to catch a deep breath, nerve damage, and functional irritation. It is not dangerous, but it can feel like that. So sometimes that's where that level of panic attack can come into play when this misfires in that direction. See if this will pop up for us. I bet it maybe going to be a stinker here. Well, I'll just talk through it. So and hopefully this will pop up in the slides that you see, but this was a video and I can find the video and maybe we can send that along with it. But one of the calming exercises for anxiety, and you might have heard this before, it's called the 5-4-3-2-1. And the idea of it is if you're sitting in a space, let's say a doctor's appointment, and you're starting to get really anxious, I would tell you to take a deep breath, like deep breath where your belly actually extends. Let that breath go. And then look around for 5 things you can see, 4 things that you could touch, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can like feel or connect to. So I would say, if I'm looking around, I'd say, I see these things, I can touch these things, I can hear these things, I can smell these things, and maybe take a drink of water. And the idea of it is it calms your oversensory, your senses. It calms them down to a place that you can actually acknowledge what's happening in your space and you don't feel so overwhelmed. Another would be breathing exercises. Square breathing, take a deep breath in, a deep breath out, a deep breath in, and then let that breath out. And you just do that in a square. Sometimes closing your eyes is helpful in that way. Activity is very helpful for anxiety, getting up and taking a walk, stretching. If you like to do yoga, create a project, doing a puzzle or painting, coloring, playing cards, that can be helpful. Excuse me. Questioning your thought patterns, like what's happening right now? Excuse me, that is actually causing me to feel this way. Medication can be helpful. Talking with your doctor about like if that is something that would be supportive, what are my options? Therapy is helpful. Less caffeine. Caffeine's a really big trigger for anxiety. And I like caffeine, so that's a hard one to not do. But I think acknowledging if I'm starting to feel jittery, like maybe back off on the caffeine. And then writing out your triggers. So maybe acknowledging when I go to this friend's house for dinner, it's loud in the house, that's a trigger. They talk at me, that's a trigger. They, don't offer water, that's a trigger. And that can acknowledge, like, those are going to make me feel anxious. What can I do before I do that to feel a little bit more in control? Oh, there's my guy. See, They like to just be silly with us here. Okay. All right. The next one is grief. This one I think is a significant one around a diagnosis and just the changes that come into play. Acknowledging that grief is the experience of coping with loss. And it doesn't have to be a loss when it comes to a death. We all kind of think about that. Like, yeah, there's grief and death and that painful period. Grief extends way beyond that. It can follow an event that disrupts or challenges our senses of what we define as our regular, everyday kind of functioning. It's a loss of connection and how that defines our new normals. How can grief present? This is kind of probably a little bit of a overwhelming slide. So I think the pieces that I really want you to take away is that grief can present in 6 significant ways. Shock and disbelief. It's hard to accept. I didn't think this would ever happen. It can present in sadness, profound sadness of a universal experience that can often lead to loneliness or isolation. It can present in guilt. Maybe feeling like, I don't know how I'm going to get over this or how someone else is going to get over how this feels or not knowing what I need. It's going to present in anger. I think this is a significant one. And maybe even not knowing what you're angry about, but being angry about the changes that are occurring. It presents in fear. And that fear can often trigger anxiety or can trigger feelings of depression. And then it can be also presented in physical pain, like body aches. Like you've heard this, like my heart feels like it's broken. Knowing that also is like, if you're feeling where I feel really uncomfortable in my body, like part of that can be related to feelings of grief. That fatigue, weight loss, weight gain, migraines, headaches, kind of being aware of those things. I think the part of grief that is really important for me to get across, and we were talking about this in one of our care partner groups the other day, is that ambiguous grief or loss. And understanding that ambiguous grief or loss really has no clear resolution or closure. It's something that has happened and it's not traditional grief. It's uncertainty. It feels confusing. It feels unpredictable because a person isn't necessarily gone. They're still around you. You're still around yourself. But there's these feelings of physical or psychological absence. So thinking about like, if there is, when I worked at Courage a lot with brain injuries, I would always hear the conversation of, this isn't my personality. This isn't how I used to be. And so it's really hard to relate to people or for them to relate to me because this isn't how we used to connect with one another. And there's a lot of grief and loss in that, and knowing what does that now mean for going forward in relationships. So I think this is the piece that's like, what are things that I can do? And that little starred part, I think, is really important to remember, is that developing these skills takes time and really offering yourself patience. It's not going to be overnight. We're not going to get it perfect. It's a fluid action. It's not linear. It's not going to go, if I do this, and then this, and then this, it'll be better. It's acknowledging this might happen. I did this, and then now this feels this way, and it's going to ebb and flow. But truly being able to find meaning, naming the loss is extremely vital. Finding the people who you can really talk to and feel vulnerable with. The adjustment or the mastery. So when an unbelievable circumstance occurs, where do I find my normal? Where do I find a healthy way to say I'm sad and confused and angry? And then what do we do with that? Reconstructing your identity. Who am I since I've experienced this loss? Where do I belong now? And how do I find purpose? And I'll tell people, even just those 3 questions, writing those in your phone or writing those on a spot where you can really, when you start feeling that loss, being like, okay, let me think about that a second. Where do I find purpose now? Who do I belong with? Or who do I want to actually connect to me? And how does it look different? Normalizing that ambivalence. acknowledging that it's going to feel conflictual, it's going to feel emotional, but being able to say, like, it's okay to feel that way. And then what do I need out of that today? Revising attachment, being very clear that a person can feel physically present, but maybe cognitively or psychologically, there's a difference. Maybe there's depression now where there wasn't depression before, or there's anxiety now where there wasn't anxiety before. And then how do we work together to be able to keep those relationships feeling important, but also supporting one another in what we need? All right, this is a little bit of a repeat, but I think the biggest piece I want you to take from this is that grief is not a one size fits all. It's very different depending on a person, history, ethnicity. And there's stages of grief. We've all heard the stages of grief, but they don't happen in a very sequential order. And being clear that as a care partner or even as an individual, you are going to experience pieces of grief and they are going to look very different. But being able to acknowledge that you have a choice, that you can connect, and the importance of communicating is essential. It's like the 3 C's of grief is how I like to kind of say it. So these stages you've probably heard about and seen before. I think we like to talk a lot about that. Just in general, because I think it's comforting to people to know. So acknowledging that grief, there's shock and denial initially, there's pain and guilt, anger and bargaining, depression, the upward turn, so things might start feeling a little bit better, the reconstruction or redefining, and then working through. And this last one has actually only been added probably in the last, I'd say 15, 20 years. To books and literature and such as acceptance and hope. There's a story about the man, his name is David Kessler, who actually wrote this book with the initial woman who came up with the stages. And he had a loss of a son. And he said that he could have totally been taken over by the grief of the loss of his son. But the thing that he needed to remember is he had 18 years with him. And what he learned and what that child had brought to him in that time frame was significant. And so what he could acknowledge of it, like, I have accepted the loss, and then my hope and my learning from my relationship with him, and then what I want my life to look like going forward is really important. And so I think that's that piece of it is like life now, if there's loss, what are ways to find acceptance and hope? And also being able to say, like, what is the positive from this? What is the new learning from this? And then how does that support my relationships? All right, this one we won't spend a lot of time on, but having these slides, I think this one is maybe an important one to look back on. I call them the mediators of grief. So what is your relationship to the change or the loss you're experiencing? So looking at it as the nature of a relationship might have changed. The cause of the change, was it natural? Was it traumatic? Did it come out of the blue? History of that loss. Was it an unresolved family dynamic? Was there personal or family struggles, either before or after? Other stressors, has it contributed negatively to finances? To family, to what maybe I did work before, my job looks different now. Individual factors, age, gender, culture, and then just social factors, which I think is probably most important, is where am I supported? What relationships, how have they differed, and how do I want them to look now? And then what's my engagement in activities? Being able to get out of the house and do things I really love, or for people to come in and support me in, or support me in, and also maybe allow me to be a part of their engagements and different activities and relationships. So the grief will change. There's no right or wrong way. I think one thing that I like to talk a lot about is sometimes there's a difference between how we react to things and how we respond to things. So reactions can be more impulsive, where being able to respond to them, it gives us an ability to recognize, to step back, and then to be able to find a way we want to walk through it. So recognize what the loss is for you. Is it a loss of independence? Is it a loss of time? Is it a loss of relationships? Just a couple examples. And then reactions to that. What am I needing? Do I need support? Do I need to ask for support? Do I need, another day where I'm feeling supported this way, but maybe on this day where I'm a little less patient or have more irritability or more anxiety, do I need to be supported differently on that day? And knowing that both can exist in the same space. All right, I'm going to roll through these ones because this is more of, I think, kind of acknowledging on your end that you can read through these a little bit. But the one piece is, if you've ever done a therapy called DBT, there's something in it called urge surfing. And essentially, it's like a wave. So maybe I feel sadness or I feel anxiety or I feel grief, and the wave will go out. I feel more able to recollect myself, to re-experience memories, to reinvest in what I want to do. And then I feel some relief. The wave comes back in again. I might recognize the changes I've been feeling. I might realize that there's different ways to accept. So I kind of let go. And then as the wave goes out again, I might have to readjust. I begin to settle into my new normal, daily life. I might change how I think about things. And then I might find different areas of control. But knowing that day to day, those emotions, that wave goes in and out. It's never the same. And it's really being able just to ride it. Like, what am I learning from it? What am I letting go? What am I taking back in again? Deep breath. Again, that kind of goes back and forth.
All right, so we have about 10 minutes left of our presentation. So I'm just going to really quickly highlight this slide and for you to know that, again, the American Stroke Association does have a specific resource on grief as it relates to aphasia. So just wanting you to know, you'll get a link. And this is another good handout to print and share. A lot of good information on the website as it specifically relates to aphasia.
All right, well, Ruth moves through these ones quickly. So one thing, and this is, I think these slides are helpful, and this is actually probably an ongoing conversation. We could probably have a whole different presentation on this in itself, but the changes in relationships and intimacy around different medical changes or different diagnoses. There's this thing called the intimacy wheel that I like to point out to people. It's that these are all things that we need as a human being to feel connection to another person and closeness to another person. We need emotional connection, physical connection, intellectual, spiritual, and experiential connection. And when we feel all those things, we're able to find a good place with our person or our friends or our family. Sometimes that can change when things change, in our world, and being very aware and patient with that. This is the 8 dimensions of well-being. So all of us actually need all of these things to feel like we're a whole person. And we can read through those like physical, emotional, intellectual, social, spiritual, financial, environmental, and occupational. And then there's the little things underneath each of them. But if any of these don't feel like they're getting met, you can kind of feel a little bit off kilter, a little bit off balance. And this is kind of the same thing and maybe a little bit more of a different component.
So this slide is just one more highlight to bring you to some additional resources. Intimacy after stroke. There's information on the Stroke Association website. Changes in personality and mood as it relates to stroke and aphasia, and then self-esteem post-stroke. So, we'd encourage you to check these out too and talk about them with your families as additional resources.
All right. And these ones I'm just going to flip through because this is really for you. These are some coping skill resources for you. Kind of mindful questions to be able to ask yourself when you're feeling those maybe emotions of depression, anxiety, grief, intimacy, or relationships. And then again, how am I speaking to myself? Like little ways that you can maybe give yourself cues of being able to be more compassionate. And then these are just daily check-ins for mental health. I call them bookends. So in the morning and the evening, really checking in on these areas of like, how am I feeling? What's going on? And I would say doing this daily can be a helpful resource. And then one more bodywork exercise, setting the timer for 1 minute, and then just going through each of these things that they say to you is a way to be able to calm your nervous system to be able to function. And then these are some areas of being able to talk to people with therapeutic support. So one-on-one support, there's emergency crisis lines in everybody's areas, if that's something that would be helpful if you feel like you're in crisis. Group therapies, DBT, like I'd mentioned earlier, intensive outpatient programs, virtual support, whether it's therapy or a care partners group, stroke support groups across the Twin Cities. There's many of them. The Brain Injury Association or the Brain Injury Alliance. We have a website on them coming up here. It's very supportive. They have a lot of free resources that they can talk to you or even talk you through if you would call to their volunteer coordinators. And then ARMS is another program that can be very helpful in your community, and that's offering a lot of mental health support, either daily, once a week, or coming in a couple hours a week or a day. And then acknowledging how to find counseling support. And this is something, if you have any questions after this, because I'm kind of flipping through this fast, please don't hesitate to reach out. Psychology Today is a very helpful resource to be able to look at different therapists' biographies so you know who they are, what they do. Reaching out to county case managers, the Brain Injury Alliance, their free resource for facilitation is really helpful. And then, of course, MnCAN has some mental health resources on their website as well. All right, that was fast.
Mm-hmm.
All right.